Here now, live in studio, we got State Representative Jack Ladyman is with us. Jack, how are you, sir?
Doing good, Paul. Thank you for having me.
It's always great to have you on, sir.
It's great to be here.
And in studio. So impression of the session, 92nd General Assembly. We'll just kind of start there. State Representative Jack Ladyman, what was your impression of the session 2019?
Well, Paul, let me say I was a lot more involved in this session. Of course, I retired back in January from my day job, so I had more time to spend, and got a lot more involved. And I think it was a good session. I actually think we did a lot of good things. The thing that I like to tell people when I get an opportunity to talk are the smaller things that we did during the session, because a lot of people talk about the big things, and they need to be talked about, and they're important issues, and people need to know where we all stand on that. But there are a lot of small things that are really good things that we did that helps the state or helps groups of people in the state. After all, we're representatives. That's our job title.
Yeah.
So if I have one or two people in my district that has an issue, I need to represent them. So we have good bills that only apply to a few people that really don't get out into the public, that people need to know about, because there are good things that we do. As you know, I'm a little bit of a full glass person.
Yep.
When it comes to glass of water.
You got that binder?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
And so I like to talk about the good things, and you know, you need to, we have a platform, and we, as a representative or a senator, we need to help motivate people to do better. And I learned from coaching that you can motivate people and they can accomplish great things that they don't even know they can do. So I think we have a responsibility to do that. But getting back to the subject, I think it was a good session. I think it was the best one since I've been down there. Now, there's a lot of discussion, controversy, disagreement on some of the things that we passed. But those important things, and we can talk about the highway plan. Everybody talks about that, so I don't want to spend all my time doing that.
Well, yeah, we can get that out of the way and we can move on. I mean, let's just, if you don't mind, the tax policy. Let's just talk about that.
Well,
go ahead.
Here's my stand. I think I've said this before on your program. You know, I didn't sign a no tax commitment because I don't believe in that. I believe there are cases where you might have to do that to increase taxes. I'm against raising taxes in general. But, you know, in business and in my private life, I've learned that, you know, put things in categories. There's critical needs, there's needs, and then there's wants. If you have a critical need, and speaking as an ex-mayor, you know, people have to have good, clean drinking water. That's a critical need. So in a city, if you have a need for that, to maintain that, that's got to be done. That's critical. Mm-hmm. Fire department, if a house catches on fire and they call 911, the truck's got to get there. If you need police, if it's a safety issue and you call 911, that police car has to get there and the guy has to get there fully equipped. Those are critical needs. If you cannot maintain those services adequately for your citizens, then you have to have extra revenue. So those are critical needs. And I would vote for a tax increase for those critical needs if it cannot be covered any other way. And I felt like the road program fell into that, because roads are critical to jobs. In our society today, Paul, as you know, we buy most things at the grocery store. Mm-hmm. So we would not have food if we didn't have a way there. So roads are critical.
No doubt about that.
No doubt. Now, there's debate and there's differences on, well, what is adequate roads, you know. But I think most people realize that we pushed this down the road enough that we really needed to do something. If you've driven from Jonesboro to Little Rock on Future 57, you know that there's some work that needs to be done.
Well, you got to stay in that left-hand lane, don't you?
Exactly. I mean, that's a good example.
Yeah.
And that's only one example. If you drive around the state, as you probably do, and I do, you know that there are places in the state that really need some attention.
Yeah.
And the Highway Department tells us that they don't have adequate resources. Now, they may not be using those resources correctly, and we actually passed a bill to monitor that closer. Mm-hmm. I think Rick Beck sponsored that bill. So we're going to monitor them a lot closer since they're getting more money, and that needs to be done to make sure that they're spending the money correctly.
Well, so were you discouraged at all? And I had somebody tell me this, just in terms of the going to the people for the revenue to fund the roads, that there was no attempt to first, cut spending. Like somebody said, it would have been one thing if they would have been like, we found $50 million to cut here to do the road, so we don't need $95 million, or we don't need $400 million. We only need this amount because we did at least try. But that wasn't even an option of discussion, was it?
Well, it was a discussion, not what you saw on the floor or in the committees, but it was a discussion among us in the House, and it was talked about. That was talked about 2 years ago, and I voted against that plan 2 years ago, the last session. But it's a timing issue, Paul, and the ducks just weren't in a row to do that. I mean, there was no concrete. When you get down there in the House and you're voting on bills, it's a sausage making process, and everything has to be lined up to get that done. And we just didn't get that done. There was not time to do it. And there were good ideas.
Right. And I think, just from a bird's eye view, you look at past sessions, I think this was a little bit of a crisis that was put off in a way. I understand the argument. The argument, the roads are going to get so bad they're going to be even more expensive. But from a general standpoint, if you take, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. Talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman, if you take the gas tax increase, income tax was great. That was a great cut of the income tax. But then you had the gas tax, which basically took most of it back. You've got the sales tax election, which is going to be a big deal to not let it expire. Then the internet tax, and I've got DFNA's numbers, and so I'm wondering what you think. At the end of the day, are the people, especially in the first couple fiscal years, the people are going to be paying more money to the government than they were before the session? Do you agree with that?
That's possible, Paul. I don't know. I am kind of a numbers person, but I haven't really looked at that. And I understand that idea or that thought.
Yeah.
And that may be true. I'm not sure. But let me say one thing that I saw what you just said, that people had ideas. They had 3 or 4 bills where they had means of cutting costs and applying that to the roads. One of the reasons I didn't vote for the highway plan last session was that the governor would not put any general fund money into highways, and I felt like we needed to do that. Mm-hmm. I really feel like the sales tax on cars and car parts should go to the highways because that's where it's used.
Yeah, me too.
But that was not a winnable debate. I tried that.
Mm-hmm.
So the governor agreed this time to at least put, I think it's $38 million from the casinos into there. I don't really care where it comes from, but it needs to come from that general fund.
Yeah.
So along that line of thought, we had 3 or 4 bills that were trying to get onto the floor that would provide money to roads without the half-cent sales tax.
Okay.
So what I did, I had a bill, didn't get a lot of attention, but it did get passed and got through. And what it does, it goes into interim status, but it requires Rev and Tax Committee, and I use that committee instead of creating a task force because that's their job. And I know a lot of people feel
Thank you for that.
You're welcome. But that is what they focus on. Now, the problem with that is you don't have the attention. I'm running this bill. I'm not on that committee. So I don't know how it doesn't work as well as a task force as far as getting your input in. Mm-hmm. I don't think, but we'll see. But what my bill does is it requires that committee to meet at least once a month and to try to identify savings, growth, efficiency improvements in state government, to allow a bill to be presented at the next session to reduce the state sales tax by 0.5%. What does that do? That basically transfers that money from general fund to highways for that half cent.
Yeah.
So you increase it for gas, you decrease it for general.
Yeah.
So it basically does what those bills were trying to do, but we have 2 years to develop that.
Yeah.
And I think I think that can be done. That's about $280 million that we need to identify. There are a lot of things going on, Paul, that are going to save us money. As a matter of fact, I was in the council meeting 2 weeks ago, and last month we were 34 million, I believe that number's right, ahead of budget. 34 million in 1 month.
Yeah.
Okay. Now that's 1 month.
Right.
And
and I think it was the Gazette reported like over $100 million from 1 year to the next or something.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
It was a lot. It was a big amount.
Big number.
Now, income tax are coming in, so you can't just use 1 month.
Right.
But that's an indication. So that's a lot of money, right? And so we're going to see growth with the tax reduction, the income tax reduction. That's going to spur the economy. I think we're going to see more growth there. I think we've seen that nationally with the income tax reduction.
We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman, and I appreciate you talking with us on the roads. Can you talk about you as the chair of public health this session? So I don't know if we've interviewed in impressions of the session too many chairmen of committees, but you're the chair of public health. What did you think of that? Give us an impression of that.
Well, I asked for a B committee, and the chair, the speaker gave me probably the busiest A committee down there. And at first it was a little shell shock because it is a very busy. You probably may have been in some of those meetings, and you realize how important it is. But I mean, public health is, it may be number one as far as affecting people, and it also has labor and welfare in that as well, which I like, the environmental and the ADEQ, working with them. But we did address a lot of important issues. The biggest thing out of public health, or the one that gets the most attention, is these scope of practice bills, because you're talking about what doctors, nurses, and anesthesiologists and those folks are allowed to do in their profession with their education. And we're engineers and farmers and insurance salespeople on that committee, judging the qualifications or the abilities of these doctors. So it's an important responsibility. It really is.
And you were supportive. I want to let the audience know you were supportive of a lot of the deregulation attempts. Not many were successful because they just didn't have the votes, but you seem to be supportive of deregulating and giving people more choice when it comes to who they see.
I was, Paul. And a lot of the doctors, we have 3 doctors in the house now. Dr. Johnson, I've become good friends with him, and Dr. Cloud, very good people. And we debated this issue, obviously. It's funny because when you get something that affects the medical field, the doctors all line up. When you get something that affects the legal field, the lawyers all line up. So that's going to happen. But they told me, they said, I can't believe you're an engineer. You got education, and you don't want other people doing your job that you got educated for. And what I told them was, hey, when I was a plant engineer, I wanted things given to the electricians, the mechanics, the millwrights, that I didn't have to do, so that it would free me up to do the more important things. And that also reduced costs. If I could get someone with a lower education, requirement, or education that they've gotten and paid for, that saves money. And that same thing in business can be applied to the public. So the bottom line, the reason I supported many of these things, but I vetted the education very closely of these 2 groups, whether it's the ophthalmologist and the optometrist, or the CPRNs and those folks.
Right.
But I believe if these people with and I don't want to sound negative about this, but with a lesser education are able to do more things, then it provides more access in rural areas, and it reduces the cost. Okay, the ophthalmologist is a good example of that. That's the one bill that passed.
The ophthalmologist didn't want it.
Right.
But
optometrists are in 65 counties. Ophthalmologists are only in 16 counties. And, of course, the ophthalmologist, and I understand their viewpoint.
Yeah, they spent $116,000 lobbying this session, the highest amount the ophthalmologist did.
But those folks went through a lot of education. They spent a lot of money, and they are professional, and they would provide. In a blue sky world, they would provide the best service. I don't argue that at all. And I don't argue that they don't have a better education and more qualified. They are. But it's a matter of reality. If you live in southern Arkansas and you're 200 miles from an ophthalmologist and you need something that these other folks can do, that's the only way you're going to get it.
Yeah.
If you're a widow, you don't have a car, you don't have anybody to help you, you can't get to Little Rock or Fort Smith or Fayetteville or Jonesboro.
That's a great point. That's a really good point.
So they can get that there. Plus, they can do it in one visit instead of 3. So it saves a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
The question, and nobody argues that point, the question is that treatment adequate? You know, is that good enough? And that's where we vetted that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And if you were ever in our meetings, you know that we had multiple times where we had 10-10 votes
Mm-hmm.
in that committee.
Yeah.
And we had multiple roll calls. I called a few myself because I think you know that I'm going to be honest about if I can't tell,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call the roll.
Yeah.
And I had a few people mad at me on the committee for doing that. But hey, if I can't see it, I'm not going to call it.
Yeah. Get them on the record, too. That's what I say. I say get them on the record.
Well, we had, I would say, 4 or 5 of these issues that were 10-10 votes right down to the wire.
Yeah.
And if you were ever in there and saw us vet those bills, you know that they got vetted.
Yeah. Oh, they did. I mean, it was they examined every issue, you know, every which way to Sunday, and it was very interesting to see. You know, the medical society is extremely powerful.
Yes.
I realize that more than ever. When they decide to support something or try to oppose something, there's a lot of people, especially on the public health committee, your colleagues, they listen to what the medical society says. And so that's why I think a lot of these deregulation, that's what I call them. I think these are bills to deregulate, give people more choice, more freedom. I think that's why a lot of them failed. We're talking with State Representative Jack Ladyman. Really appreciate you spending some time with us. Your impression of the session on social issues. We don't have a lot of time left, but what did you think about the social issues?
Well, I don't have a specific one that comes to mind. I think we passed a few abortion bills, which are good. I think we need to follow suit with some of the other southern states.
Yeah.
And, you know, my top 10 folder, I think you were at a dinner meeting the other night and you heard me talk about that. And, you know, they got a lot of attention. I went to the floor and I forget the bill, but I really got a little upset, Paul, because they were talking about, well, we're 49th in this, and thank God for Mississippi. And, and I went to the floor and I said, look, I'm tired of this. I don't want to hear this again. I'm going to start a folder of the top 10 where our state, Arkansas, is in the top 10. And I did that. And, you know, in the medical field, as an example, we're number 6 in all of the 50 states in retaining doctors that get educated in Arkansas.
Yeah.
That's important. You know, there are other things like that that are important. But you said the medical society is strong. They're strong and they're very important. I mean, when you talk about personal health, that's a very important issue. So they're a very important group.
Yeah, definitely. Last question. Were you in favor of moving us to a fee-for-service Medicaid expansion? Did you ever make a decision on that?
Representative Miller talked to me personally about that. That was his bill, and I supported him on that.
That would save a lot of money.
It sounds to me like it would save a lot of
Yeah.
money. I need to get a little more information on that, but Josh, the way he explained it to me, yes, I'm supportive of that.
State Representative Jack Ladyman, I appreciate it so much for coming in and giving your impression of the session. It's always great to have you on.
Well, thanks for having me back, especially on Johnny Cash Day.
That's right. That's exactly right. Johnny Cash Friday, folks.